questions, you know, the drill, put more questions in the chat. Once I'll give 5 minutes of my personal story, I will tell you about the questions and my take on those. So those of you who know, I've been traveling to Israel for the conference, which went really well. And then after that, I had this absolutely amazing trip to Petra, which is in Jordan, and then to Old City, Jerusalem. So I was just, you know, it was just kind of dream come true kind of trip. Last time I've been in Israel a few years ago, I didn't have time for travel inside. So anyway, Israel and Jordan is some of those countries where you can come there and live there for months and still come back feeling like you just visited for a day. Anyway, so the positive side was offset by me getting COVID. So now you can welcome me to actually having a full-blown COVID. So I started getting sick on Wednesday last week. Sore throat, little low-grade fever. I thought it was a cold. How can I get it? I'm vaccinated and I'm practicing every, you know, precautions, whatever. So yeah, started out as mild COVID. What I learned as a result of this when I got back, and I got really lucky because they did a PCR on a border from Jordan, since you have to Israel doesn't recognize any other test but their own test. So you have to do your test when you arrive. And so somehow they didn't do the test right because the test came back negative. Otherwise, I would have been stuck in there for 10 days quarantine. So somehow I got through. And then Wednesday, so that was started on Wednesday. Before the end of the weekend, I felt okay. But Monday and Tuesday, I almost ended up in a hospital because I started having the worst headache I've ever had. And then at some point I started getting paralyzed. So right side of my body started getting numb and paralyzed. And I was convinced I'm having a stroke. So I was really close to call 911. I'm in a cabin. So, you know, that was another part of a problem. I didn't want to go anywhere to the hospital here because, all right, well, there is no hospital nearby. The closest one I think is in, I don't know, Hagersville. Probably not a really good hospital. Anyway, long story short, this probably was a migrainous headache with a kind of a migraine associated weakness, but it scared the hell out of me. I got deeply depressed. I couldn't talk to anybody, and I couldn't sleep for a couple of nights. And then kind of this Wednesday, I started finally feeling better quickly. And then yesterday, I felt a lot better. Today, I feel not fully back to normal, but much better. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that this is either an Omicron by the symptoms, especially the headache, or one of those newest variants that are starting to circulate in Europe. So I'm sure it's BA2. The question is whether this is something else. I don't know. I don't think that they automatically test. I sent out PCR on Sunday, and then result came back positive on Monday. And what's interesting is the way Maryland handles the quarantine. So every day you get the text and you have to answer to the questions, and they will automatically tell you. So they just told me yesterday that my quarantine is supposed to end on Saturday, so I can start seeing people on Sunday. So it's an automated system from their end. What else I've learned? Well, I've learned that actually once you have a symptoms, that the rapid tests are pretty good. So I had 2 different tests. They both were strongly positive. Collection is everything. So I'm guessing that a lot of false negative tests is simply an appropriate collection, because the guy on a border with Israel, I can, of course I didn't say anything, but I swear I figured the test is going to be negative. The guy's like barely touched my nose and the throat and not far enough at all. So I knew that this was just, so yeah, I had to sort of been put into this retreat after retreat space. Lots of things went through my head when I was really sick, of course, including the fact that that's not a regular cold. That I'll tell you. Even though it started out, I wonder if the reason I got so sick is, you know, I was under such a positive stress that it was just an amazing trip, and I push. And then I finally kind of got home, relaxed, and you know, the cortisol dropped and everything kind of went sideways after. But I'm sure some supplements helped. I'm sure, you know, good food and everything. And hopefully there's going to be no long-term anything. So far, my energy is almost back to normal, and the mood is way better today. So with that, my 5 minutes of glory of getting COVID, not in United States of America. Anyway, I guess, you know, there's this saying, at least in Sufism, that everything good comes with a tinge of not so good. I guess in Chinese, they would say yin and yang, right? Can't have everything positive. So this is my offset of negative in the positive of the trip. Okay, off to the question. So the first question, I forgot who asked this, but the question was about Paxlovid, the new antiviral by Pfizer, which is a combination of antiviral medication and medication that suppresses the metabolism of the first one, ritonavir. So it helps the liver to not break down the drug fast enough so that it can stay in the system to be effective. My understanding, I was just trying to figure out how you buy it, and apparently it's listed as if it's already on sale in all the pharmacies in the area. Now, whether they have stocks or not, I don't know. But clearly, if you getting sick and you call the doctor, they're supposed to be able just to write a regular script. I did check the databases for the electronic medical record. It's already in there. So I could formally just put the order in and send it straight electronically to the pharmacy. Now, what happens after that, I'm not sure, because I don't know if the actual insurances cover it, and I don't know which pharmacies are carrying it, but it should be there. I have not come across any new studies on the drug, so the original study showed very high efficacy. There is a small risk of liver failure, which I think is relatively low risk from my reading, unless you're having pre-existing liver problems. There's also a pre-existing warning if you have kidney problems, you have to adjust the dosing, but that should be done by the treating physician at the moment of prescribing. So that's Paxlovid question. The other question was, should we start all getting second booster? There's nothing new. A little bit of more research is not really clarifying this question. So I say no second booster until more information comes. I think the first booster is still going to hold for many months for most people, probably more than 6 months. So I would say no additional guidance from CDC at this point. Unfortunately, by the looks of it, they will not be able to catch up even if they develop the Omicron booster. It looks like the Omicron is already mutating to whatever's next. And so I think it's just going to be a constant chasing game. And so I think we'll just have to wait and see. But as you can see, I had all the boosters and I still got sick. So the point being is, I think we're going to see this. One thing I just recently read, an interesting study showing that the people who were vaccinated on time seem to have a lot lower risk of long COVID. So that's an interesting data, which if I'm fully recovered, I'm a good example of that. But long story short, I think even that is probably not still enough information. It's just, it hasn't been long enough to make those statements permanently. So, okay, 2:10. Let's see, questions. I don't know, Benita. I'm not sure what the answer. I don't actually know what the answer now would be. What we do know, right, that the boosters we got in the original series are probably not directly covering Omicron. They're protecting against severe illness, but it looks like they're not protecting against getting it. So I'm pretty sure that I got it at the conference. A lot of people were not masking. There were periods I wasn't masking. I was speaking, so I wasn't masking during the speaking engagements. And then the friend who came with me from the University of Chicago, Leslie Mendoza Temple, she also got it. So we both got it. And her husband, who was with her, didn't get it. So we must have picked it up from someone at the conference, which he didn't attend. It was just two of us. There's no real other easy explanation. So, okay. So there's a lot of data coming out on long COVID in terms of what it is and what it is not. It appears that, at least from cardiac autonomic dysregulation standpoint, it's pretty significant concern. So a lot of people with long post-COVID have cardiac consequences. They are not structural problems, so like cardiovascular disease, for example, blocked arteries, but they are functional deficits, meaning people are highly sensitive to stimuli, so their heart rate goes up very quickly. They have a hard time exercising because of that. Their stamina endurance is lower. So those are all kind of a performance measures of cardiac health, which probably means that it's a similar consequences to any chronic autonomic dysregulation. I would guess that part of the treatment will be what we're doing here today. There's a lot of mind-body work, a lot of careful management of adaptation of autonomic nervous system, Tai Chi, yoga, the things that we know can dramatically optimize the personal responses to stimuli, or hyper responses, or overstimulation. How did I treat the symptoms? I didn't treat my symptoms. Doctors are the worst patients. No, I never take anything until I'm ready to die. So well, actually, it's not true. I had CBDA, and I've been taking it throughout once it started. I don't know if you guys know. So we've in the middle, we're almost about to finish the study on CBDA, and we're seeing about 3-fold reduction in COVID. So patients who take CBDA, the higher the dose, the more potent the drop. It's not a controlled study. We simply pulled together data from people who take it. It was just a questionnaire to the company that I use their products for patients, and they contacted everybody, and that's the correspondence we got. So we're gonna wait a little longer to get a little more data, but we're probably gonna submit the study in the next couple of weeks to somewhere. We'll see who will accept us. So I've been definitely taking CBDA, but that's more when just like as a thinking that maybe it'll shorten the length of and then just the regular things, the standard protocol, quercetin and acetylcysteine, vitamin C, zinc, just whatever I had. But I wasn't treating any symptoms. But don't use my example. There's nothing wrong about taking Tylenol or Motrin when you have a bad headache. Well, actually, here's my treatment. Wait a second. I had a really important treatment on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Come over here, treatment. So that's my treatment. He was just like laying on me. And it's interesting that usually this is, he was initiated by Luann. So he's a Reiki dog. That's Noodles, those who remember. And so he would just come over and lay down next to me. And I swear I felt it, like maybe I'm crazy and placebo and whatever, and he still does. He still lays down over there. And usually when he's not my dog, he's Angela's dog. So usually he's with her. Of course, she's not here. So maybe he's with me because she's not here. But I tend to think that he's here because he's trying to help me. So say hi, Noodles. Say hi. Yeah. All right.
I can't even with that cuteness.
Oh.
What about the plane? Yeah, so the problem with the plane is when I was eating and drinking. This is a long flight. It's an 11-hour flight. You can't not. I was thinking not eating, but then I had to drink. So the mask was off several times. But I'm not happy about it, but at least there is a tracing, and I don't know what happens. I don't know if I actually looked around who was sitting around me. There was no people, or more than 40, I think. There were like a bunch of young crowds on the plane. But yeah, that was my only two things that I felt upset about is that one, and then the driver who was driving us from the Petra to the border. So there's this regular car, and he was interestingly, he was masked all the time. And then I texted our guide who took us to Petra, and he said nobody got sick. So, and that was just 2 days ago. So he should have gotten sick. because I got sick from whoever within a day or two. So I either picked it up on Monday or Tuesday at the conference, and by Wednesday I had symptoms towards the afternoon. So the onset was very fast. I mean, of course, theoretically, I could have picked it up somewhere else, but it's very unlikely since the Leslie and I were flying from completely different areas. And so, I mean, theoretically, it's possible to coincide at getting it from different places, but it's quite unlikely statistically. And also the fact that, you know, it's much more likely we got it in an enclosed space where most people were not masked at the conference. Israel is extremely relaxed about the situation. There's signs mask everywhere. No one wears masks outside or inside. No one. Even in the cabs, the drivers don't wear masks, which I find fascinating. You know, you'd think that they'd be pretty, and they don't enforce anything. It's kind of just like in airport, that's pretty heavily enforced, but beyond, you get out of airport and that's it. No one masked. So, all right, let's see if there are more questions as we finish up. Yeah, I think there is an evidence that COVID can exacerbate existing dysautonomia. I agree completely. That's fear for everybody, especially for those providers who are very familiar with this condition. I'm very worried about some of my EDS patients, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. They all have the POTS, and so those patients I'm very worried about. So I think with that, it's 2:18. I want to hand it over to Mark to keep us on time. Thanks, Mark, so much. I don't know why he keeps saying "stay well, man," and not putting his name in, but we'll take it.
Everybody knows me as Stay Well Man. I'm easy to find online as Stay Well Man. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. And I'm going to have a chat. No, how do I take that? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to have a chat to you today about how you can live well and shine on. And I'll just get rid of these little bits and pieces. And hopefully this is, here we go. So a bit about me. I've been a pharmacist for 31 years. And every time I say that, I think, golly, that makes me sound so old. I've had Stay Well Pharmacy since 2001. And I'm trained in holistic healthcare. I've done integrative health work for 20 years in lifestyle, diet, medication, supplementation. And as Janet mentioned earlier, I'm a graduate of GW. I did the integrative medicine program in 2019. Now, how often do you hear someone say, I don't need vitamins, all I need is a good diet? I mean, many medical practitioners out there still say that. And in fact, up until about 20 years ago, I used to say that as well. I'm so embarrassed now. And we know that the human body is designed to cope, but all may not be what it seems. Back in 1990, the WHO said that by 2020, 2/3 of all global disease will be chronic and strongly associated with actually poor diet, sedentary lifestyle, and tobacco. And of course, we've gone past that 2020, and there's certainly an awful lot of chronic disease going on. And so you might ask yourself, though, why should I supplement? You know, and I would say, well, look, have the rate of heart disease increased? Yes. Has the rate of diabetes increased? Yes. Has the rate of mental illness increased? I would say yes, whether that's diagnosis or whether, but I would say overall it is. And has the rates of cancer increased? Well, you know, 40 years ago, cancer appeared to be an unusual thing. And now it almost seems like, you know, every third person you talk to. And so I've often asked, you know, can you name a major disease group that's reduced in numbers? I believe, well, in New Zealand anyway, stomach cancer is coming down. So that's fantastic. But many, many things are increasing. And doctors are already admitting that we don't get enough folic acid, iodine, calcium, vitamin D, and omega-3. So clearly then, it's no longer true or fair to say that all you need is a good diet. And of course, when I visited the United States, it was so hard to eat healthy. I'm gluten-free and dairy-free, and trying to find food that I could do that other than going to the supermarket every time was just very difficult. I want to introduce you to a hero of mine, Louise Light, and she was an American dietetic scientist, and she was charged with changing the 4 squares model into a different model. And that's where you get the 3 square meals a day expression from. And that was your protein, carbohydrate, fat, and dairy. Yes, even back then, dairy had its own square. And she came up with a model here, and you'll notice here that the whole grains say 3 to 4 servings. And then it went through the food regulatory bodies and came out the other side at 9 to 11 servings of grains. And she had placed her whole grains at the top of her pyramid, and it had been come out at the base of the pyramid. And she went on to say, I vehemently protested that these changes, if followed, could lead to an epidemic of obesity and diabetes. I would also add in cancer, and couldn't be justified on either health or nutritional grounds. This is a dietetic scientist saying this, and yet I struggle to meet nutritionists, dietitians that have even heard of Louise Light. And she spent the rest of her career until she died in 2010 trying to tell people. So this is what we've been told, but sadly, many people's food pyramid looks like this. And this is what I found when I came to the United States, is that it's just so difficult. And really, this is the kind of food pyramid we should be looking at. And you'll see, of course, the #1 vitamin down there is water, and quality water, not the stuff that's full of chemicals. But I want to address maybe why supplement. And because there's so many opinions of what you should take and who should you believe and where should you start. And actually, you know, the whole jigsaw of health, it can be really confusing, and you're listening to various people, and you can feel worse off at the end than you were at the beginning. But I would say that hope is not a strategy. And I want to talk about your genes for a minute. No, not these genes. I'm talking about these genes. And what we found when we look at genes are not things that sit in your ovaries and testes from the time you are born to the time you die. These are constantly being unraveled and re-raveled. And these are the genetic code with the map on what to do. And of course, people have become a little bit more aware about RNA and DNA with, the COVID discussion and some of the vaccines using mRNA. And so these things are unwound all the time, and they help make proteins and other substances in the body. Unfortunately, your genes can get worn out. And a big one of those is inflammation. Inflammation can be a swollen knee. It can be that prickle, that little thorn that sticks in your skin, which if it's short term, the immune system can deal with that. But if it's more long term and more chronic, such as somebody with inflammation in their gut, then this can really be a problem. Maybe there's a little inflammation poison finger, or here's a Time magazine article on where you've got this thorn, this piece of wood or something that's stuck in there. And if this is chronic, it can actually be known as the secret killer. And there was an article done by Time magazine on that. And they linked it to, I'm sorry, this slide's not great quality, but as you can see, inflammation's linked to all sorts of things: dementia, Alzheimer's, autoimmune disease, arthritis, diabetes, cancer, and pulmonary disease. So clearly inflammation is paramount to how we manage to stay healthy. And then, of course, you get the other side of things where people say, I'm sorry, but it's genetic. But they've actually found that degenerative diseases are actually 10% genetic and 90% epigenetic. Now, what does that mean? It means that those genes, it's not about what genes you were born with, it's what you wash your genes in. And if you surround your body with things that are not good for you, you're going to alter your genes, because genes are active. They're not a blueprint that's written in hard ink. They can get turned on and turned off, which is pretty exciting. And then you've got telomeres. Telomeres are these little protective things that are a bit like the protective bits on the end of your shoelace. And you'll see at the top of the screen, the shoelace has got its little eyelet on there. And then at the bottom, you'll see the other end of the lace is all shredded. So it's really good to have long telomeres, very sexy. Now, they've done twin studies. And what they've found, though, is that when they've looked at lifestyle factors, they've found that twins actually can have hugely different outcomes. And so these guys were born with the same genes, but they did different things to their genes. And so sometimes when you're looking at rolling the dice in life, It's not about how many dice you have. You know, we all know of people that have lived really well and still have got a disease, and we know someone who's been really naughty and done all the wrong things and lived to be 90. But the more factors you have going on, the more die you end up having. So if you were to get a chronic disease by rolling snake eyes, which is 2 ones, so if you've only got 2 dice, then you've only got 1 chance in 12. But if you've got 3 dice, now you've got 3 chances in 18. So the more dice you have, the more chances you can have of having a disease. But of course, it's still possible to have 38 dice and not roll a single one. Now, I want to tell briefly about the most important medicine for this century, and that is sleep. That's my #1 nutrient. If you want to, you can swallow all the pills you want. If you're not getting quality sleep, then things are a real problem. And they're finding that the longest lived people obtain between 6 and 8 hours of sleep, and the shortest lived people sleep less than 5 hours, or they oversleep more than 10 hours. So that's interesting, isn't it? And they also have done some horrendous experiments over the years and found that if you don't sleep for 12 days, you can die. So what I want to ask, though, is insomnia a disease or a symptom? And that's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because we see insomnia in so many other what they call comorbidities. In other words, diseases that happen at the same time. And so then you're looking at the brain and you look at the different psychological bits and pieces. And of course, here we are looking at mindfulness, and the fabulous Leanne is going to help us with that soon. I mean, you'll see some of the issues here that have a huge impact on our mental resilience. Now, who's stressed? But actually, a more important question is, who isn't stressed? Okay, and we've got new stresses going on at the moment, and there's just all this bits and pieces going on. And so we're finding that it can be acute or it can be chronic. It can be mental, it can be a sleep disorder that we talked about. It can be a metabolic condition. If you've got issues with your blood sugars, that's glycemic dysregulation. That is a stress. And the chronic inflammation that I talked about before. And sometimes you can have multiple, and sometimes you've got one, and that leads to others. So back in the day, we had the caveman, and we only panicked when the saber-toothed tiger came along, and then we got to chillax. Whereas, you know, now we've got stress, and our emergency toolbox of how we deal with this has become depleted and broken. And our prehistoric bodies, which most of what we've still got is a prehistoric brain and prehistoric body, we just aren't coping with all of these multiple stresses. But here are the top causes of stress in the United States. I'm sure every one of us in the room here can identify to one of these things, if not several of these things. And COVID just dumped a whole lot more on top of that. When we get a stress, and we've talked about this many times, but briefly, you know, you have this fight or flight. There's also faint and freeze are the other two that you can get, possum in the headlights. And this is your HPA axis, your hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. And these are the glands in your body that make adrenaline and cortisol and increase your blood pressure, because you've got to either run from the saber-toothed tiger or stand and fight. And it's the pedal to the metal, which improves your alertness with cortisol. And you need cortisol. Cortisol starts in the morning when the sun begins to come up, and it goes down when the sun goes down. And then at the end of the day, you shouldn't be eating, you should be resting and digesting. And then going to bed on a virtually empty tummy and having a good night's sleep. I talk about the earthquakes. We had the earthquakes back in 2010. I personally had 7 funerals in 7 days after that, and I certainly don't recommend that as a healthy outcome. But people have then been on edge, and every little tremor that we'd have, people would be waiting for the next one, and it would affect your natural cortisol cycle. This is a sign of what should look normally. I mentioned about when the sun comes up, you've got the cortisol coming up, and then when the sun goes down, it's all dropping, and that's where you've got your reparative happening. But if you've got stress hormones happening here, then you'll notice that the red line there In the previous slide, see, it went up, that's cortisol, and then it goes down. But in this one, it just artificially high. And so it doesn't sync properly until almost midnight. But melatonin's kicking in the later part of the evening and peaks at about 2 in the morning. So if you've got high cortisol, which suppresses your melatonin, you're never going to have a decent night's sleep. And that's why a lot of people who are stressed will wake at 2 and 3 in the morning, because that's when melatonin starts to drop. And then there's coffee. Now, as a pharmacist, we talk about half-lives, and half-lives are how long does it take for half whatever to leave the body. So the average coffee has about 60 milligrams of caffeine in it, give or take, which means then that 6 hours later, which is its half-life, you've got half a cup, 30 milligrams. Another 6 hours later, you've got 15 milligrams. Another 6 hours later, you've got 7.5 milligrams. So that's from one coffee. I have a decent coffee once a day in the morning. But let's say you also have one at morning tea, then you have one at lunch, and then, hey, it's afternoon tea time. Let's have another one. You've now got 4 coffees on board. I want you to have a look at the 2 a.m. You still have nearly a full cup of coffee on board. But that's if you did it as a single instance. If you did that every day, and how many people do you know? They have a coffee before work, they have a coffee at morning tea, at lunch, afternoon tea. You've got 4 coffees. You reach a system called steady state. And that means that the body actually gets saturated. And if you're having those 4 coffees, you actually permanently have nearly 2 coffees on board 24/7. And you wonder why you're not sleeping. So you need to manage those coffees, have a wonderful coffee early in the morning, and then switch to something else. So you don't have that as an additional stress. There's melatonin. I mentioned earlier, in New Zealand, we can't buy melatonin over the counter. It can be got through a pharmacist, but most of the time it's prescription only. But I want you to have a look at some of the supplements in there. You've got your iron, folate, calcium, B6, magnesium, zinc, and these things are going to be required. So if you're not getting some of those, and in an earlier slide, I mentioned how, the doctor's already saying you need to supplement your foods, then you're going to have a problem. And one of the most commonly prescribed medications in the world are indigestion remedies. There used to be Zantac. Of course, Zantac's been withdrawn from the world market. And then there's Losec. I know you have other products over in the United States. And these affect, these are called PPIs, proton pump inhibitors. They block the manufacture of stomach acid. And these will directly affect your vitamin B12, your iron, your magnesium, your calcium, your vitamin C, and your zinc. And those are all things that are helpful in the production of melatonin and other things. Then, of course, you've got antibiotics that deplete the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract, the good bacteria that help activate some of your nutrients. Diabetic medications affect your B12 and your folic acid. Antihypertensives, they can affect things. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatories like Motrin, they can produce this thing called leaky gut. Metformin affects B vitamins, especially B12. Your oral contraceptives and your hormone replacement therapies that you're taking orally. And then statins. At one point they were saying, let's put statins in the water because cholesterol is a real problem. I got this from A4M. Look at all those things just from taking a statin. So the thing, though, is that everyone's an individual and there's no one size fits all, even though you'll often find people try to rubber stamp us. And so I like to start with the basics to try and give you a place to begin with to recognize where you can go, because it's a real jigsaw. And so I always look at this like building a house. So this is my stay well house. And you'll notice that first we've got the ground and then we've got the foundation. Now, everybody's foundation is different because everybody's ground is different. Everybody's lifestyle is different. Everybody's nutritional needs in terms of what they're already eating, drinking, the soil that they're around, the work-life balance that they've got. Everything. So in order to consider a foundation, it needs to be individualized. But my foundation is a multivitamin. And a multivitamin obviously is a B complex and multimineral. Again, some people might have insufficiencies, so they can't metabolize or activate their B vitamins properly, so they need a methylated form of B vitamins. Some people might need more of one mineral than another. In New Zealand, we're low in selenium, so selenium is really good here. Everyone should be considering magnesium, because magnesium is used for 350 different things in the body, and zinc's used in about 250 things in the body. So those are really interesting nutrients and minerals, but a multivitamin is a foundational, paramount thing. The next thing in your house is a carpet. You need a nice, thick shag pile carpet. If you don't have carpet, I'm sure you can have beautiful wood floors, but they don't tend to be warm. And they're noisy and what have you. But hey, don't get me wrong, wood floors are fab, but to have a nice thick carpet in your body is really important. Of course, that's your probiotics. Now, probiotics are your bugs, your healthy, happy bugs. You've also got prebiotics, which are the foods that the body like to give keep the bacteria active. And there are some foods that contain probiotics, and there are some foods that are considered prebiotics, but also you can use probiotics in a supplemental form, either in your food or in a capsule. And these can actually help change or modify or maintain a healthy carpet in your body. And that the gut is, the majority of your immune system starts in your gut. And we now know that bacteria are actually responsible largely for our immune system. The third thing in my stay well house are nice strong walls, but these also need to flex. They don't need to be rigid, because the next time you have an earthquake, it's easier if your walls flex. This, of course, your omega-3 oils. And your omega-3 oils chiefly are from fish. If you don't, if you're vegan or vegetarian, then you're going to need to supplement with the algae, because I didn't know this for a long time, but it's the algae in the sea that make the omega-3, and then little fish eat the algae, and then bigger fish eat those, who are eaten by bigger fish and bigger fish and bigger fish, and then we go and eat the larger fish like salmon and tuna. The problem is too, though, that those big fish also have accumulated the mercury that's in the water. So the little fish had only small amounts, the big fish had more. So you either get a high quality fish oil supplement that's had the mercury distilled out of it, or you eat little fish, so you're getting only little bits of mercury. But then, of course, you need to eat a lot of those to get decent omega-3. Things like flaxseed oil and other types of linoleic acid and so on, these often need to be activated into the alpha linoleic acid, and some people don't have the genetic predisposition to do that properly, so that I would always recommend that you get some omega-3. And lastly, of course, you need a roof to keep the radiation out, and this is my antioxidant. So these are things like your vitamin D, your vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, beta carotene. There's heaps of them. There's the anthocyanins that you can get in things like the colored fruits or the prawns. So colored things, look for the colors, and this is why they talk about having multiple colors on your plate. But you've also got to think about where have these things been grown, were they ripened artificially, all sorts of things. So whilst I used to say diet, I now take supplementation. You'll notice there's no chimney in my house. That's because smoking is an absolute no-no. And of course, you need a door, because I've had somebody say to me, where's your door in your house? That's your mouth. So whatever's going through that door is important. And I get people asking me, what do I do? Start with a foundation. But for goodness sake, I get people asking me all the time, what about this? What about that? Like, what about bee pollen? I said, well, look, if you want to sit out in the wilderness with your foundation in your jacuzzi with your bee pollen, and you've got no walls, carpet, or roof, hey, more power to you. But honestly, why would you want to go and spend the money on an expensive product like that when you don't have walls, carpet, and a roof? So those are the things to consider. Get some advice. There is so much out there. Recognize that you're the individual, and it needs to be individualized to your own needs. So if you're going to get someone who just reaches without asking any questions, then consider, other options and other people. This is a very busy slide. I'm certainly happy to give this to Janet so that she can send this out to you. This is actually one that I used as part of my GW Masters program. And these are some of the things that we talk about in this meditative program all the time. But I hope that you've been thinking about the jigsaw, you've been thinking about the mind and sleep, and we're going to do some meditative stuff very shortly. I do a 5-minute blink and breathe process, but I hope that I've made you slightly less confused and lost, maybe slightly less perplexed. You've probably got a whole heap more questions now, which is excellent, but you've begun to finish the jigsaw and put some of the pieces in to help you to live well and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And Luann, we're running a little short on time, but why don't you take time all the way to the end, all the way till 3 o'clock.
Okay, very good. Mark, that was amazing, as usual. What we're doing today for our meditation program is what I call a facilitated self-inquiry or discovery. And we're using some questions to do this. So while I'm listing these questions, if you can get some paper and pen or pencil, that would be great, because I'm going to have you do a little writing too. So the questions are for this inquiry is, what and where am I holding? Where can I let go? What does letting go feel like? And what else can I know about this? So inquiry is a template that my very skilled coworkers and I have used over the last 2 years as we meet weekly to support each other. And I feel like you all are pretty skilled too, for having experienced so many different practitioners and methods and techniques in our Mindfulness Friday gatherings. It is helpful to have one person facilitating and holding the space while you are doing the inquiry. So afterwards, Janet will provide you all with a handout that you can use with a partner. The inquiry method is to consider a question and then drop into the body, bypassing the conscious mind and tuning into the dialogue that comes up to you from you. Of course, being me, we're going to use our hands and breath, and as I said, a little bit of journaling. So as we start to prepare, gathering the pen and paper, we're also going to do a little bit of movement, and we call this just gathering the energy. We're going to do this 4 times. If you want to bounce a little bit before you start, but the method is to raise the arms up to the heavens, gather your energy, and bring it very slowly down through the body. And you want to do this 4 times. If you have time or space, if you have the space to turn, then we'll turn to the next direction, sweeping the arms up, gathering, and slowly quieting the body and connecting to the earth as we bring the arms down, turning again, arms up, and slowly, slowly bringing down and connecting to the earth, turning once more, floating the arms, the hands down to the earth, and then back to the original position. We come up and we go down. And so you just should start to feel the mind start to calm a little bit. And then if you will find a comfortable seat, and if you're seated, I want to make sure that your feet are grounded on the floor. If you want to lie down, just make sure that your arms can rest comfortably by your side. We've learned a lot about the power of breathing practices through the many teachers that the Mindfulness Fridays have supported and invited in to share. So if you have learned a breathing practice that you find brings you calm or clarity or brings you fully into your body, I encourage you to connect with that favorite centering or calming breathing practice. And as soon as you find your preferred place, take a moment to start to engage in that breath. Settle in and find your breathing pace and just observe breathing in and breathing out. Our first inquiry is what feels tight or stiff or painful or uncomfortable. What feels free or loose, soft or full of light? Do not turn away, but stay with your sensory information. And most importantly, notice the feeling that arises. Find that pace of breathing in and out that allows you to further settle and focus just on this moment to moment with no judgment, no expectations, just observing and continuing to breathe. Even breathing in and out, taking in air, letting it go. Next, place your hands somewhere on the body that feels comfortable and easy to do. If you're seated, it might be hands on your lap. Or you might have one hand on your heart, one on the belly, or even two hands somewhere here or here. Touch provides that feedback to the autonomic nervous system, and it provides integration in the mind-body schema. And touch combined with sacred words opens our pathways to healing. So next, we set an intention of inquiry or discovery for yourself. First question is, what am I holding? Where am I holding it? And breathe into that body awareness for the next 30 seconds. What is emerging as a result of this inquiry? And if you want at this moment to jot down a word or two of what you discovered, perhaps it's something simple like the breathing shifted, or an emotion changed subtly, or a memory or an image arose or flew by quickly. Next, where can I let go? What does it mean to let go? What does letting go feel like? Whatever arises, take a moment to jot down a word or two. And just continue to breathe and experience what arises, moment to moment. No judgment, no expectation. Just curious inquiry. And sometimes we feel like there's more there just under the surface. And so the question then is, what else can I know about this? Or is there anything else? When we get quiet, we are able to listen more deeply to the wisdom of our bodies. And we do want to drop beyond the superficial to the elemental. Breathing, focusing, and letting go. So this is the pattern of inquiry, and let's do it one more time together. Again, just adjust, find your comfortable seat, move a little bit if you need to. Once again, allow the breathing to deepen, expand, and soften the body. Allow the light to flow in and connect with each portion of your body. Upper structures, head, mind, throat, middle structures, chest, upper belly, emotions, digestion, and lower body, organs of elimination, legs and feet. This intention we're setting is for healing, not only for yourself, but for the world at large. What is a desire for us all? Breathing into your intention, but then again, letting it go with no judgment or clinging to an outcome. Just reflecting and bathing in this deep connection. Breathing in, we expand our consciousness. Breathing out, we dissolve into our oneness. Where am I holding? Where can I let go? What does letting go feel like? Be one with your heart center and bask in gratitude for what was revealed to you. And you can bless what you have received with this simple thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want, you can return to your familiar surroundings, looking around at your objects, and reground yourself in your personal space. If desired, you can return to the group room to say goodbye until we gather again, or you can stay in this meditative space while I read you this blessing from the Chinook people of the Pacific Northwest. The Chinook people are in this area where I'm living in Oregon, and they're made up of 5 tribes. And it's very much like the Thanksgiving prayer I've read before from the East Coast Native Americans. We call upon the earth, our planet home, with its beautiful depth and soaring heights, its vitality and abundance of life. And together we ask that it teach us and show us the way. We call upon the mountains, Saddle Mountain, Waikiakum Mountains, Walapa Hills, the summits of intense silence. And we ask that they teach us and show us the way. We call upon the waters that brim the earth, the waters of our great river, the Ayagate Imati, and the waters of Walapa Bay, and all of the waters, the flowing of our rivers and streams, the water that falls upon us. And we ask that they teach us and show us the way. We call upon the forest, the great cedar trees, reaching strongly to the sky, with earth in their roots and the heavens in their branches. Cedar tree, the keeper of all knowledge. And we ask them to teach us and show us the way. We call upon the creatures of the fields, the forests, and the seas, our brothers and sisters. We call upon those who have lived on the earth, our ancestors and our friends. And lastly, we call upon all that we hold most sacred, the presence and power of the Great Spirit, which flows through the universe to be with us, to teach us and show us the way. To all the teachers and to all the students, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Luann. Thank you, Mark. This was wonderful. Always powerful to have both of you guys. Everybody stay safe, stay warm. Next week, thanks, Janet. We'll have Dr. Andrew Wong from CIH, Capital Integrative Health, and our own Angela to lead the mind-body practice. As they say, you know, enjoy yourself, go home, and whatever you do, don't do what I do. Don't get COVID. So see you.
Be safe, everyone.